Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I'm Bill Oram, joined by Brenna Greene. Brenna, Portland as a sports town has forever changed. No longer are we just a major league city with an NBA franchise, an MLS franchise, and an NWSL franchise. We are now a major league sports city with a WNBA franchise as well. Long time coming, long anticipated, long awaited, long hoped for announcement this week of the WNBA's return to Portland. A lot to get into on this. We're going to talk team name. We're going to talk the Bhathals and their sudden rise in Portland sports. But Brenna, I gotta go.
It's quite right.
I mean, gosh, in 8-9 months, they've gone from people who, obviously were known to the NBA community, known in the business community, were part owners of the Sacramento Kings, but no local ties in Portland. I don't think anybody would have said, hey, Lisa Bhathal-Mirage and Alex Bhathal are power players in Portland. That wasn't the case. And all of a sudden, in less than a year, owners of, arguably the most, I'll say the most popular women's sports brand in the world up until at least Angel City came on the scene. And now, bringing the WNBA back to Portland. I mean, just what an incredible impact in a short period of time. So we'll talk them. We'll talk name. We're going to talk Oregon State football. I know it's a week ago, but the Ducks are on a bye, and we're going to at least take a look back on that and some of the key takeaways. But Brenna, I got to go back.
We kind of had to wait to do this podcast too. Just know.
Yep. There was some thinking that there was going to be an announcement this week, and here we are. But I do want to go back to the days of 2000, 2001, 2002, little Brenna running around. What do you remember about the WNBA's previous time in Portland?
Yeah, I was lucky, I guess, because I was friends with someone whose mom worked at Adidas. So she would get tickets through Adidas all the time to these games. So I went to a fair amount of Portland Fire games with one of my friends. And, I said this, online, but I remember, being, that's, you're in first, second, third grade around those times. Sure. And, you'd go out to recess and all the girls would play tetherball and foursquare and all the guys would play basketball. And it was not, and I guess football. I didn't really participate in the football part of it, which, looking back, playing football on concrete was an interesting decision. But, that's what you did back in the early 2000s. So, I remember it was very strictly like all boys playing basketball. The girls didn't play. And I will totally give credit to my friend, Shannon Taylor, who is absolutely not listening to this, but still does live in Portland.
Shout out Shannon.
Shout out Shannon. She was the first one to be like, well, I want to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And I can almost 100% tell you that it was because of the Portland Fire that she kind of got the idea that she was like, well, I could do this. And then, I started going to Portland Fire games with her and I was like, well, why can't I play in the basketball games too? And so it was basically like her and I, maybe like one other person who were like, okay, we're going to play basketball with the boys. And so that was like such a huge transformative moment for me. I actually didn't end up playing basketball like competitively until 5th grade. But it's one of those things. And I was sitting there on Wednesday and I was looking up in the boxes and, I don't, who knows if it was I remember it being one of the corner boxes. And so I'm like, I don't know if I'm looking at the right one or not, but like I had a moment where I just kind of got emotional because it was like, man, 22 years ago. And now we're finally here. We have been waiting for this for so long and we're finally here. So, it was just, it's a day that, I've been waiting for a really long time. And, a day that I just really appreciated. And last year having it be ripped away from us, like the way it was just so cruel. Like, because everyone felt like it was going to happen, and then to have it all fall apart the way it did was just like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to happen? Like, is this really ever going to happen? And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're here. So, yeah, just a day that meant a lot to me personally as somebody who was the target demographic for the Portland Fire, for sure. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what the day was like. What about you?
Well, I went to a couple of Fire games as a kid as well. And, I obviously loved basketball as a kid. I was a huge Blazers fan, like so many of us who grew up in the state, and more basketball was a good thing. And when it really clicked for me is I remember watching the women's NCAA tournament in 2000, I want to say, when Jackie Stiles set the women's scoring record in women's college basketball with Southwest Missouri State. And I loved watching Jackie Stiles, the ponytail assassin, take Southwest Missouri State to the Final Four, which was incredible. And then the Fire ended up drafting her. And so her being in Portland was a huge connection for me. I was a huge Jackie Stiles fan. I actually had an opportunity to interview her on this podcast about a year and a half ago when her documentary came out. And that was a thrill. And we talked at the time about the potential of bringing, a WNBA franchise back. And at the time, that was the fall of 2022. We hadn't really heard about the efforts that were kind of underway at that point. So, really fond memories of those games. I remember my aunt who, always would give me like Blazer tickets for Christmas and things like that, got us tickets to a Fire game, and we sat courtside. It was the only time that my family ever sat courtside at a game. And I sat on one of the baselines, and, that was an incredible thrill. And I remember going home and we taped the game on VHS so I could see myself on TV. It was a big deal. But the games in those days, Brenna, were on Lifetime, television for women, which feels like such an anachronism in terms of how we thought about women's sports 20 years ago, where the only place you would broadcast WNBA games was on the channel that also gave you the Golden Girls and Designing Women. And I am so grateful that now we're in a place where, women's sports are mainstream and it can be recognized on merits and not just as programming for women. And, I think that that's the key difference of looking at this announcement versus then. This is in 2000, I'd have to go back to be certain about this, but, the WNBA was in its nascent days. It was not, it had not really found its footing. We'd seen women's sports leagues fail more often than not. The Portland Power had folded only a couple of years ago in the ABL. There was no certainty of kind of what the actual runway for the WNBA was going to be. Now, here we are 28 years into the league, and with the incredible boom and rise, this is a league that you want your city to be part of. You want it to be in, you want to be a part of kind of the movement and the moment. And I think it's been meaningful to hear Alex Bhathals talk about, the WNBA as a rocket ship, which is certainly a business term, which if I was going to invest $125 million, I'd feel pretty good about investing in the WNBA right now. So there's a very clear, business motivation for doing this, but also you are bringing something that is exploding in terms of, cultural awareness and penetration. And I think that's great for Portland. And, we can talk about all of the factors of this, but, Portland is coming out of, some of the roughest years in its modern history. And to have, a professional sports league say, no, we want to be in Portland. We want to be in the center of Portland with a team, I think is hugely meaningful. And it just shows that somebody believes in Portland, and not just the WNBA, but the Bhathals, who don't have local ties here, have now invested in Portland twice this year. Have put in 180 plus million of their own money into Portland, into becoming shareholders of the city. I think is really meaningful. So just tons to sort of unpack with the team arriving, but I do think about it in kind of those big picture ways of what it means for the city to have the team here, and what it means for girls, and not just girls. Going back to Jackie Stiles, that's the first time I remember watching a women's basketball game and getting so pumped up. I was probably 13. I'm a little older than you, and and going out and shooting on my basketball hoop on the gravel and like pretending I was Jackie Stiles because she was that good. So, I think visibility and presence is so important to the next generation. I think it's great for Portland and the children of today to have this team here starting in 2026.
And, just for me, just piggybacking off of that Jackie Stiles point, like, little Brenna, like, I look like Jackie Stiles, I could and even down to like, I'm not big. I mean, I guess I'm taller than probably the average woman, but I'm not that tall. And Jackie Stiles was kind of the same, I'm 5'7" on a good day. So like, just being able to see someone that looks like you in person,
right,
doing these things is a big deal. And it made me feel like, okay, well, Jackie Stiles can do it. I love Jackie Stiles. Maybe I can be like Jackie Stiles. And, I obviously was not the, I was not at the level of that. But like that's something that, definitely kind of gets in your brain around that time. So yeah, I think it's absolutely ginormous for little girls in this city, to say the least.
Do you want to talk name? Do you have a, I mean, do you want to talk specifics or do you want to talk concept? Because I do think there's two conversations here about what a name should, there's ideas for names, but I also think there's a conversation.
On what you mean by that.
Well, okay. So like there's a lot of ways to think about a team name, right? Like, is it just supposed to be something that people are going to be able to rally behind and connect to, that feels local? Like, the Portland Fire was a good team name because it sort of played off the Trailblazers and they felt kind of like partner teams. This is the Northwest. Do you want something kind of quirky? Portland is a weird city, quote unquote. Do we want that quirkiness reflected in the name? Or do you think of it more, and I tend to, I would say, think of it more in the aspirational sense where there is such meaning behind women's sports in this city. There's such power behind women's sports that, the Bhathals have talked about this being the global epicenter. Does it almost need to be something more abstract and aspirational as opposed to, like, a lot of people have suggested the Portland Roses? And I would say at first blush, that feels a little too literal for the city of Portland and kind of what this team is going to represent going forward. So I wrote a column that I think you've read that had probably like 40 ideas, and it ran the gamut. Some of them were more serious than others. I think some of them were quite clearly better than others. Readers have responded with, a couple hundred ideas. Literally everybody has given their 2 cents on this, but I don't know if I've heard yours. So one, what do you think it should be conceptually? But then where does that lead you in terms of what you think the team should actually be called?
Okay. Well, I like the Portland Roses idea. I do. I think that it pairs well with the Thorns. I think that it represents what the city's about. It relates back to the city. And I don't think that's too far of a stretch for people to understand that are outside of the city. I mean, it takes 5 seconds to figure that out. If you're like, why are the Portland Roses? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Got it. So I like that idea. I'm not a big fan. Like, I've seen a lot of Portland Swifts. I'm not into that. I'm not into that at all. I'm sorry. It's kind of like that is like an abstract concept to me. I don't really know what being a Swift means. And it just, in today's day and age, like, I'm sorry. When you hear the word Swift, I think of Taylor Swift. Like, I don't really want I wanted it separate, yeah, I'm not into that one at all. I've seen like Portland Peaks. That's okay. I can understand it, but it doesn't really like mean anything to me. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I just don't. I definitely know I'm not on the Portland Swifts train. Let's put it that way.
You're familiar with the the Swifts at Chapman Elementary and the birds, the Swifts that fly out of the chimney at Chapman and are like a huge Portland.
Yeah, but that's not something that anybody else would think about. I mean, I don't automatically think about that. Like, that's a one time a year thing.
Like, I mean, during the WNBA season is when that happens. I mean, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate of where that is coming from. And then it does sort of represent, you know, it is. I get how people got there. I also would say, again, this would not be the reason to make the decision, but if you could have, I don't know, how many fans does Taylor Swift have? 90 billion. If you could have, I mean, if you have millions of Taylor Swift fans buying your merch and it becoming the unofficial team of Taylor Swift, I mean, probably that's not going to last forever. So probably not a great reason to do it. But I see the multiple layers of the onion there. Yeah,
I understand the thought process. I just think it's important that this is something of our own, you know, and it feels kind of cheap.
Again, if you were naming the team because there wasn't a Swift connection or because the Swifts were not a huge Portland icon, which they are, again, this is not my favorite, but it comes from a sincere place.
I didn't know about the Swifts growing up here. So there you go. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So Brenna's out on the Swifts. Please direct all hate mail Swifties to bgreene@koin.com. Is that your email address? I don't even know, but we're going to go with that. It is. Don't forget the E on the end of Greene. Koin.com, koin.tv. I don't know. You guys can figure it out. There's the internet. At Brenna_Greene on Twitter. Is there an underscore? I don't even know. Find her online. Find her online, Swifties. Okay. So
and I love Taylor, but
so you are on the Portland Roses. I understand completely. I think it is a little basic.
You think it's basic? Okay.
I do. I don't think it's very clever. I think that I don't have a huge objection to something playing off of the rose concept, but I think just going with the roses is not very interesting. And maybe this is like born from my, you know, love of wordplay and puns.
You want the
where I'm
Portland
like, it's
petals?
No, it's just not clever. I don't think it's clever. Like, I would much rather do something with Rose City in the name and then something like alliterative with Rose City. Like, I hated what Kirk Brown favored when he was the presumptive owner. He liked the Rose City royalty, which was part of the conflict he had with Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, because the league did not like the royalty. I do kind of think he was on the right track, though, with Rose City and alliteration. Like, I like that. I think that's cool. I think that's distinctive, and I think that's branding. I just think you need to be sure about what the R alliteration on the actual team name is. Listen, again, I threw out a million of them, and I could talk myself into any version of them. I think the Riptides is kind of cool, but I also think that you want to be careful in this moment. I don't think that when the WNBA formed and when a lot of teams came into the league, you saw a lot of names that were a play off of their men's counterparts. You know, the Detroit Shock and the Detroit Pistons, and obviously the Portland Fire, the Portland Trailblazers.
Sparks. Wait.
Well, Lakers and Sparks don't have that, but Monarchs and Kings, Jazz and Stars, Spurs and Silver Stars, which actually was the Spurs, the Heat and the Soul. That was kind of a really convenient way to go about it. The WNBA stands on its own now. I understand, like, institutionally it doesn't, and financially it doesn't, and the NBA is obviously a huge investor or a supporter of the WNBA, but like it needs to stand on its own. So I think that anything that actually is a play on the Blazers, it should be avoided. So like I did suggest, like, it's like the Pathfinders. I mean, it doesn't really do it for me. Pioneers is its whole thing, because now we have to have a conversation about whether or not Pioneers is even appropriate, because Lewis and Clark has made the decision to move on from being the Pioneers, which I wrote about earlier this year, and I have lots of feelings about. We don't need to get into now, but I think it's a little much. We can have that conversation another time. But I think something playing off the rose theme works. But like, again, this is Portland. And I don't think that a super literal name or just a mere mascot is enough for this city. When you talk about it being the global epicenter of women's sports, when you talk about it being a place with like, you know, real values around women's sports, I do think that something that sort of is more of an ideal being represented in the name, and also being fun to say, and also being a good team name. I'm not saying they should just be the Portland Progressives or whatever, but you know, something around I did suggest the Portland Progress. The Portland Pride was an indoor soccer team when I was a kid, and you know, I don't know if we are open to team names that have been used by now defunct teams. I think the Portland Pride is great on many levels, with a lioness mascot. Where it can mean multiple things. I kind of like the Portland Perennials because roses are perennials, and like the team would contend each year. So that's kind of the train I'm on with some of these. Like even, okay, like another one that kind of fits that mold. Again, I have a million of them.
I knew that when I brought this up pre-podcast, you were going to have so many things to say.
Well, I spent some time thinking about it.
Yeah.
But like, okay, we're a river city with the pilots, which refers to, you know, boat pilots.
Yes.
And think about like what motors a boat, right? What about the Portland Propel? Now, there's the water, and so wouldn't want it to be confused with that water brand, but like the Portland Propel, it has a literal interpretation that is locally relevant, but again, it also has that sort of aspirational pushing the city forward and like a movement. So I think things like that, like I don't know if I'm quite there. I'm not saying that one of those is like for sure a winner, but I just think that when you think about like naming a women's sports, you know, team in the city of the Thorns, in the city of Nike and Adidas, and of the sports bra, like it just shouldn't be the Portland Bobcats, you know, and
yeah, and
even like the Portland Power, you know, which I guess power and but you know, the power of women and the power of women's sports, like the Portland Power, if we wanted to resurrect a defunct team name, I would go with that instead of the Fire. But anyway, that's how I look at it. If I will say my dark horse that I threw out that
you have a look in your eye
is gaining some momentum. Well, so this is complicated because when people hear Portlandia, they think of the show, and people in Portland don't love Portlandia, the show, right? I get that. That said, Portlandia is a symbol of our city, sitting atop one of the ugliest buildings in the world, but atop the Portland building, or atop the entryway to the Portland building, you know, the copper sculpture of Portlandia looking over the city, holding her trident. And so I am a fan of the Portlandia tridents. I think that would be a great team name. I think it's a great team name, but I got there by thinking about. Well, I hate your idea, so okay. That's fine. Hate is a strong word, Brenna. Like we can have a conversation without hating. Like this is not a podcast of hate. This is a podcast of love. You need to love my ideas, even if you don't want them to be implemented. You need to love them because they come from a place of love. Hate has no room on the Oregonian Sports Podcast.
Okay,
but the Portlandia Tridents was born out of also the poem that it's at the base of Portlandia that says. Essentially like home is the journey we're all on. And, you know, so that like idea, taking that from, again, a literal symbol of the city, you know, the Portland journey, you know, has, again, that sort of aspirational kind of like the Atlanta dream, but the Portland journey. I don't hate that either. So that is believe it or not, that is the short version of my thoughts on naming the WNBA team.
I just would like to say one thing. I understand your thought process on the Rose City blanks, but how many other teams in this league have a city nickname as their starting off point?
Who cares? I mean, Golden State
I think
does.
It matters for branding.
I don't. I really don't. I mean, I think it is there's an opportunity to be creative. Again, it is a quirky city. I don't think you want to be the Portland Plaid, which again is also in the column I wrote that you can read at OregonLive.com, or the Portland Punk. But I do think that, like, doing something that distinguishes yourself as something somewhat apart from, the Portland Trailblazers, the Portland Thorns. Like, I think being the Rose City something is totally in play. And I would be a full-throated supporter of that if it would. I mean, again, probably wouldn't go there, but like the Rose City Raindrops, like, I like the way that sounds. I don't know if I would name the team the Raindrops, but like the other one I said, by the way, and I think this is another winner. You're going to have to change the subject because I'm not going to. I'm just going to talk about this until, like, literally, like, my computer dies, the internet goes out, the world ends, the Cascadia fault splits. Like, I don't know. I'm going to be on this for a while. But another one I liked, by the way, is if you want to be like the perennials, sort of suggests like year over year success, which I like, kind of as an aspirational goal. But if it's winning that you want to reflect with the team name, we all know that Portland Summers are undefeated. So the Portland Summers.
Oh, you do have a lot of ideas. I'll give you that.
Again, they're all in the column at OregonLive.com. But again, like, there is, I would also say, and I understand this, and I know that, like, this is not my strength, but the concept of less is more, and maybe not to overthink it. So if they come back with like the Portland Roses and it has some kick-ass branding, like, I get it. I just think it's a little basic and a little, I mean,
things I will not understand. The Valkyries.
I think the next level of creativity beyond the Roses. Yeah, the Valkyries, I mean, there is an explanation for it, like from Norse mythology and, that sort of, and so I get it. I mean, it sounds cool. The flight of the Valkyries, Wagner's epic, but I mean,
doesn't really tell me anything.
The one thing about the Valkyries is that there's not another team that has that name. Just like there's not going to be another team named the Portlandia Tridents. Like,
that is true.
But I mean, also, like, professional sports in our region, like, kind of the Northwest corridor, if we will, the Kraken, the Tridents, the Valkyries, like, all from mythology. Like, I don't know. I'm feeling like maybe like Portland can't afford to be the weak link in that chain. Like, it almost like has to be the Tridents. Otherwise, like, it's just kind of destined to fail.
What logic you have? Yeah, what logic you have?
Unfortunately, Trident is also a gum brand, so chew on that one for a little while.
Oh, God. Y'all see what I have to put up with? Would you like to move on? I really shouldn't ask you that question because the answer is no, right? You want to just stay on this forever?
I do, but I understand. I understand that we have other things to get to, so I'll let you change the subject.
We have other fish to fry, my friend. You just gave me a look. What's the look for?
Well, I just thought maybe we wanted to also talk about the Thorns piece of this, because it's been a really interesting year for the Thorns. By the way, quick thing about team names. Can I tell you a story that maybe I've told on this podcast before? So, like, when Merritt Paulson bought the Portland Beavers and Timbers in 2006, 2007, maybe, I was in college at the University of Montana, and he undertook a rebranding of the Portland Beavers minor league baseball team. He was exploring potentially changing the name of the Beavers and the color scheme. Ultimately, he just changed the color scheme. So they went from red and black to this baby blue that was whatever, fine. Then the team left. But when he was opening up the idea of renaming the team, there was like a submission process on portlandbeavers.milb.com or whatever the website was. And I submitted the Portland Thorns. I believe to this day that Merritt Paulson saw the Portland Thorns, because nobody else could have thought of this, saw the Portland Thorns in the inbox from that process and held on to it until he got the NWSL team and stole my idea.
Do you want to know something?
Don't take this from me.
You've already told this story on this podcast before.
It's a good story, and I thought I might have, but it's a good story and it's relevant to the discussion we're having. But okay, so the Thorns have had a really hard reset, Bill. 3, 2, 1. The Thorns have had a really interesting year in that, the sale finally goes through to the Bhathals. They're sold for $63 million. And organizationally, it creates a really unique situation because the Thorns were, as we all know, co-owned and operated by the Timbers. So people who worked for the Timbers also worked for the Thorns. Thorns employees were Timbers employees too. So when you buy the Thorns, you're buying, but you're taking over the team name, the team operations, the players, the coaching staff, but like a lot of the organizational pieces of it, ticketing, marketing, business operations, communications is still the Timbers. And so you have to, like, in business terms, you're like standing up a whole new operation. You're basically building it from the ground up. So even though the Thorns have existed for a long time, the Bhathals have had to basically start at the ground floor of building a sports organization that really didn't exist before. And so there's a lot of adjustments still happening within the world of the Thorns to this new reality of being separate from the Timbers. And I would contend that the Thorns are in a place in sort of this new era of their history where, they require a lot of attention, like a lot of hands-on attention, because it's all kind of a new operation around there, and obviously there have been on-field issues. The team has struggled lately. You made a coaching change at the beginning of the year, ended up giving, Rob Gale the full-time job after an impressive run as the interim. Now people are sort of like, was that the right decision? And now you have the new ownership of the Thorns. Now their attention is fundamentally divided. Like now they have, and granted, I would also submit that these are people who were not only owning the Thorns before this. I mean, they have, like Raj Capital is not just, in the business of the Thorns. Like these are busy people who have their attention divided anyway. But now their focus isn't just on the Thorns. Now it's on this new WNBA franchise. And I just think it's going, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I do wonder what the impact is going to be on the Thorns as they move forward. Obviously, both teams are getting a practice facility. Common sense and word on the street would suggest that these will be a shared operational facility.
Yes.
And it, of course, just makes efficiency sense that the Thorns will get some of those organizational efficiencies back that they lost with the Timbers by having the WNBA. So you shared marketing, communications, all those things we talked about before with the Timbers. Now you're just going to share them with the WNBA. So that all makes sense. But how does it end up impacting the Thorns as they sort of adjust? And are they going to get the attention and care from the very top of the organization that maybe they need to adjust? Threw a lot at you, but I'm just curious how you view this move impacting, an iconic women's soccer franchise.
Yeah, I just think, I keep coming back to this. The WNBA is only expanding on a certain timeline. Regardless of what is going on the Thorns, the Bhathals had to do this now, or else they were not going to have an opportunity to do it again. Because we know that the goal is to have 16 teams by 2026. So I can totally understand why there may be some trepidation on the Thorns side about everything that is going on. However, the Bhathals did not really have a choice in this. It was either now or never to get this team here. So I can understand why, there could be some hand-wringing going around that organization right now, just about the fact that, hey, like, we have so many needs that we need to figure out ourselves, which makes total sense to say. But this was not something where they were going to be able to wait for a year and make it happen.
Right.
So therefore, you got to just do it and figure it out as it comes, because if you don't do it, then you're not going to, then it's just not going to happen.
Right.
So that's where, like, my mind just keeps coming back to.
Well,
I just
want to say that the flip side of that, like, is that there were other viable bidders for this team. Like, It didn't have to be the Bhathals, but from the standpoint of, it is like, almost kind of like how you have to spend money to make money. It probably makes more sense if you are going to like put stakes down in Portland, roots down in Portland. It makes sense to create those like organizational efficiencies where you can have a marketing department that is working for two teams, and as opposed to having a WNBA team over here that's run by the Monarch Group, and Kara Nortman hires a bunch of people, and then over here are the Bhathals, and they've got their own people, and then over here is Merritt Paulson, he's got all of his people with the Timbers, and then there's the Blazers who are owned by somebody, they've got all their own people. Like, it does make business sense. So like if for some reason the Bhathals were like, oh, this is too much, they didn't have to bid on the WNBA, but it ended up making too much sense. I just wonder if the trickle down effect of what is very logical business sense ends up impacting the Thorns in ways, inevitable, ways. But to your point, like, yeah, I mean, for the Bhathals, yes, of course you had to strike while the iron was hot. This was the moment, and they understood that before they had even bought the Thorns.
Yes,
because they got the ball rolling on these conversations with Kathy Engelbert last October when we reported that the deal with Kirk Brown had fallen through and they were left without ownership, basically at the 1 yard line. And Alex Bhathal, was deep in negotiations with the Thorns. That was going to happen. But then It's calling up Kathy and saying, hey, this is who we are. This is where we are with the Thorns. This is what we could create in Portland. So it goes from being, let's own a sports team in Portland to, and they probably wouldn't use this term, but like, let's create an empire in Portland, a women's sports empire, or like Lisa said, epicenter.
By the way, if you're from Sacramento, how upset are you right now? Like, I know there's Sacramento people who want a WNBA team, and here we are. Guess what? People who are based out of Sacramento are putting a team in Portland. But no, for the Bhathal, like, I mean, I understand your point of like, hey, another ownership group could have come through. But if you're the Bhathals, you don't want that. You want to have both. You want to have both. Yeah. So, they had to do what they had to do. Unfortunately, I do think that there will be, I think you're right that there is going to be some trickle down effect. It just makes too much sense. Like, you have so much on your plate right now, and there's so many things that probably need to be. I mean, I know that they said, on Wednesday that they're planning on hiring 30 more employees between their sports franchises here in the next before the end of the year. So, that's a pretty significant amount of hiring, especially since, those are not positions where it's like, oh, we're hiring someone to, be the ball boy or something like that. Like These are like corporate level positions.
These are senior level jobs.
Yeah. So, this is a big undertaking. But yeah, I just keep coming back to the fact that yes, the timing is not ideal for the Thorns, and that is really unfortunate for them. I totally understand that. But there was no choice.
Yeah.
There was no choice. So,
team name? The Portland Peregrines, after Merritt Paulson's LLC. I mean, listen, the Bhathals and Merritt Paulson are clearly on good terms still, because Merritt was sitting front and center for the launch of a new women's sports team in Portland, Oregon. So clearly everybody's on good footing there. Yeah,
well, I didn't think that was in very good taste, but that's me. Yeah. Considering, what happened with the reason why he had to sell his last women's sports team.
The reason the Bhathals are in Portland at all.
Yes, the reason the Bhathals are in Portland are because Merritt Paulson could not run a women's sports team in an ethical way. Right. So why is he front and center? Sorry, there you go. I have an opinion. Shocker.
I thought it was interesting. One thing that I'll say is the Bhathals are, Alex and then Lisa and her husband, Richard Mirage. They are the 100% funding behind the $125 million coming in. That is the ownership group at this point, just as that was the ownership group of the Thorns when they came into town. Well, what did you see within a few months of them being in Portland? All of a sudden, created a conglomerate of investors, really high profile local investors, and also people outside of Portland like Bryce Young. But Tim Boyle, Joey Harrington, a variety of other people who are escaping the mind at the moment. But who was at the launch on Wednesday? Tim Boyle, Joey Harrington. And so while the Bhathals are currently the sole owners of this WNBA franchise, I would assume that as they move forward, you're going to see minority investors come in the same way, and kind of build this out and create more local roots with this franchise as well. I think that that's just a logical interpretation of the situation, and also something people I talked to at the event on Wednesday expect to happen. So just something to kind of watch with the future of ownership there. Okay. We were both at, it's going to be a hard pivot, mostly because I don't know how I'm going to get back to team names with this change. But I guess we will talk about college football. This has been a college football heavy podcast the last few weeks for a variety of reasons. So it's fun to get out of that bubble, but we can't ignore it entirely, Brenna. That's because last weekend we saw the 128th big football game between the Oregon State Beavers and Oregon Ducks. It was an absolute, what's the word I want to use? Actually, I thought this game was really interesting. I mean, it was a blowout, no question. It was absolutely a blowout. I just thought it was really interesting in terms of Oregon State's game plan, which I think was mostly validated. But just then also the massive, massive talent gap between the teams. So it's 49-14. Oregon wins. Oregon gets right. And, after two very discouraging games to start the season, they win a game the way you probably figured they're going to win all three of them. But I thought it was interesting in that Oregon State completely dominated the time of possession in the first quarter, couldn't get in the end zone on their first drive, had a false start on 4th and 1, like deep in Oregon territory, had to kick the field goal, had the field goal blocked. And then Oregon scored on every possession from there out until they had the backups in at the end of the fourth. Like, the game was over when Everett Hayes' kick was blocked because the Beavers couldn't stop the Ducks the entire game. So I thought the Beavers had the right strategy. They just were so much worse, which we knew. We just hadn't seen the Ducks play up to their potential. So thought it was a really interesting affair, but kind of an inevitable result. What were your big takeaways from that one?
Hello, Oregon. Thank you for finally showing up for a game.
Indeed.
That was definitely my biggest takeaway. It was like, okay, thank you. Like, all right, I'm not crazy for ranking you number 3 to start the season.
Yep.
Like, good Lord, where have y'all been?
Right.
I mean, my biggest takeaway, I said on TV, was that no sacks for Dylan Gabriel. All right. We
Huge.
now have 2.5 games because he did not get sacked at all in the second half of that Boise State game. We now have a game and a half, excuse me. Math, hard. A game and a half where he has not been touched. And considering the first game and a half that we saw, that is a marked improvement. So it seems as though Oregon has kind of settled their offensive line issues, and it looks much better now. So hopefully that will remain the same for the Ducks going against a UCLA team that is also no bueno. Okay. So I do find it highly ironic that they start their Big 12 schedule against UCLA, or Big 10 schedule against UCLA.
And basketball is going to do the same thing with the schedule that just came out. At least I didn't look at the women's schedule, but the men's schedule
USC on the women's side
also. So it's a soft launch into the Big 10 for the most visible programs.
Soft launch. My biggest takeaway was A, hello Oregon, B, okay, I think we might have finally found the right combination on the O-line.
Yes.
In terms of the Beavers, like you said, it's something where we all knew coming into this game it was going to take a very good game from the Beavers to make this all sing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that just didn't happen. And that's understandable considering the talent gap.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. The Purdue team that is coming in is also no bueno. So maybe we can get a get right game from the Beavers as well. Yeah. This week.
It needs to be. I mean, anything else is going to spell trouble for the Beavs. I mean, they've got to. I mean, they need to come out and handle Purdue. Purdue lost something like 693-7 last week to Notre Dame. So I'm not as far off as you might think. It was 69-6 or something like that. It was an absolute.
Speaking of get right games,
right. No kidding. I still don't know if we know a ton about Oregon State because I think you're absolutely right. How bad is San Diego State? Like if you can go from shutting out a team on the road one week and then allowing 49 points the next week
at home.
Mama, at home. I mean that is such a dramatic swing, and it says a lot about the opponents. But I mean, gosh, that Oregon State defense. I don't know if I've ever seen an Oregon State defense that just felt so completely helpless.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, yes, those like 1-win seasons were not good. So I mean, but like a team that like was at least theoretically supposed to be pretty decent. I don't know that I've ever seen that. And I really, didn't sack Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel didn't get touched. Okay. And the Beavers had 1 tackle for loss against Oregon's first team defense. They had 2 tackles for loss in the whole game, and one of them came late in the fourth quarter against, when Dante Moore was in at quarterback. The only tackle for loss was when they blew up a play on Jerome James behind the line of scrimmage, loss of 4. So it sets up 2nd and 14. And you start thinking, all right, Oregon State, like this is where other teams have had success. You've got Oregon behind the sticks. I think they were down. What was it at the end of the first quarter? 10-7 maybe. You're thinking like, okay, or 14-7. You're thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance here. 15-7 because they went for 2. Yep. Maybe there's a chance here. And then boom, Dylan Gabriel has the 57-yard touchdown run. And that was it. Like, so I mean, if the game wasn't over when Everett Hayes' kick was blocked, then it was over when Dylan Gabriel went on the run. And if it wasn't over then, when it was 22-14 at the end of the first half, when it's like, again, the game is theoretically in reach and you force Oregon to kick a field goal at the start of the third quarter, you're like, all right, the Beavs are down 25-14, chew up the clock, punch in touchdowns, at least keep it close. They go 3 and out on 3 straight possessions. I think they had 1 first down in there.
Yeah. And
Oregon scores touchdowns on each of those.
Yep.
That's how it becomes a blowout. So, but to your point about Purdue, if the Beavers are even a bowl team, which they should be, they should be able to roll Purdue and get back to saying all the things they were saying coming into the year about how good they can be and all that, because they're not going to see a team like Oregon again. If Oregon is the outlier, that's fine. Well, It just was like, God, they just looked bad. But again, like, is Oregon going to make everybody look bad this year now that they've figured out the offensive line? Maybe. But I need to see more from Oregon. I need to see more from Oregon State. Yeah.
No, the sample size is not enough on either end. I agree with you there. So hopefully we have a demolishing in Corvallis of the other variety this week. So
will you be on Portland CW this weekend at that game?
Yeah, we're doing a post-game show. So we're doing a post-game show out of every CW game, which are all home games, except for the UNLV game, I believe. I think, and I don't remember why, but we aren't doing one for I don't remember why.
Talk about a game that suddenly looks a lot more appealing on the schedule than it did coming into the year.
Yeah, you're right about that.
UNLV's had a lot of success to start the year. They went on the road and beat Kansas. I mean, I think they're ranked in the coaches poll, not the AP poll, but they are gaining steam. So going to be interesting to see where UNLV sits come October 19th, 21st, whatever it is, October.
I'm taking it week by week. That's what you got to do in football season, baby. to say the least. Yeah. So no, we will be. We're doing 3 shows this week, so we're busy up in the KOIN sports department, to say the least. So yeah. And by the way, I just want to add, we don't need to talk about this in extensive terms, but a big night tonight on the Oregon high school football scene. As I know I'm a little biased, but I also think it would be a big deal regardless.
Jesuit shout out incoming.
Yep. Ken Potter, if he wins tonight, will become the leader in all-time wins in the OSAA, which, the man's been coaching at Jesuit since before I was born. So there you have it.
While we're talking about great coaching legends in the state of Oregon, and I would also be remiss not to acknowledge the passing of Barry Adams, who was the dean of high school basketball coaching in the state of Oregon, Hillsborough, Glencoe, South Salem, but most importantly, got his start at Nestucca High School up on the hill in Cloverdale, Oregon, in 1960. Actually, took my Bobcats to their only boys state championship game in the mid 60s. Huge accomplishment from our little logging town, a legend in South Tillamook County and everywhere in the state of Oregon. Helped get the hoop up and running in Salem. Probably more coaches in the state of Oregon can trace their journeys through Barry Adams than any other single figure. So a huge loss in the state of Oregon for boys basketball, and obviously, to your point about Ken Potter's huge achievement, appreciate the legends in this state because there's a lot of them, and we've been blessed with some pretty good figures over the years.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
time to wrap it up.
Yeah, we're out of here. Thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Appreciate you listening, sticking with us through this one. I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to come up with more names. I'm going to have more next week.
Okay.
We're just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep throwing them at you. By the way, how do we feel about defunct team names? Like, is the Pride in play, even though there was a team called the Pride, or is that out because there was another team called the Pride 25 years ago, 30 years ago? Like, what are the rules?
I don't know. I guess I don't really have any strong feelings towards that. I have strong feelings towards the name, and not the name. I'm not a fan of that name.
Okay,
but
the other one from it. Okay, go ahead.
Which we have discussed on here before, by the way. So that's not something that is new.
The other defunct sports team name that I do like is the Portland Steel. The Portland Arena Football League was the Steel for like a year. So who cares? But
who cares?
Sorry, with apologies to Terry Emmert.
I don't hate that one, actually. I don't hate that one.
STEEL, because the Steel Bridge runs right to Portland. Huge steel industry in the history of Portland. And again, to my point about something being aspirational and like pushing the city forward, the definition of steel, metal, and resolve, those are important ideals for this city. Also in the column that you can read at Oregon Live and in the print edition of the Oregonian. Brenna, thank you for putting up with me week after week. Nobody knows how you do it, and yet you keep showing up, and I appreciate you. I appreciate that.
That might be the first pun you've said that I like, so congratulations.
Finally got there. All right, Brenna, I'm going to see you at I'll see you at Research Stadium tomorrow night, and I'll see you back here on the Oregonian Sports Podcast next week. Thank you.
Bye.